Hi there, you're listening to a podcast that's created and sponsored by Second Avenue Baptist Church. If you enjoy what you hear today, check out our website and app by visiting secondavenuembc.org. You can find our mobile app and tons more content, podcasts, sermons, and more by searching for Second Avenue on the Apple App Store or Google Play Store. With that being said, let's dive into today's episode.
Welcome to episode 25 of Decision Point, and today we're continuing our look at the book of Ecclesiastes. We'll be in chapter 3, verses 1 through 15. So as you're opening up your Bible or your Bible app, let's look at today's trivia. Which of David's sons tried to become king before Solomon? Stick around to the end of the podcast for the answer to that question. And now reading from the New American Standard Edition, Ecclesiastes 3, 1 through 15. There is an appointed time for everything, and there is a time for every matter under heaven. A time to give birth and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. Verse 5. A time to throw stones and a time to gather stones. A time to embrace and a time to shun embracing. A time to search and a time to give up as lost. A time to keep and a time to throw away. A time to tear apart and a time to sew together. A time to be silent and a time to speak. And finally, verse 8, a time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace. After going through all these times of contradictory ideas and concepts, he continues in verse 9 by saying, what benefit is there for the worker from that in which he labors? I have seen the task which God has given the sons of mankind with which to occupy themselves. He has made everything appropriate in its time. He has also set eternity in their heart, without the possibility that mankind will find out the work which God has done from the beginning even to the end. Verse 12, I know there is nothing better for them than to rejoice and to do good in one's lifetime. Moreover, that every person who eats and drinks sees good in all his labor. This is the gift of God. I know that everything God does will remain forever. There is nothing to add to it, and there is nothing to take from it. And God has so worked that people will fear him. In verse 15, that which is what has already been, and that which will be has already been, and God seeks what has passed by. It seems at this point, Solomon begins perhaps to have a turning idea that God's in control of all things. Now, whether he likes that or not, he does come back to the point that all these things he's done, that God has man do, it's been happening still for a long time. That there is some good in man's labor. That's what God's gift is to us. And everything God does will remain forever, but man doesn't really add anything to it, and there's nothing we can take away from it. All this is so that we fear God. And he's saying that everything that is has already been, and everything that has already been has also already been. God is the only one that sees all this is happening. So Solomon really points out and understands God's sovereignty over all things. See, it's God who directs the righteous in all their ways, through their work, through their play, through their joy, through their sadness. But it's within Christ, in God, here what Solomon talking about rather. It leads them through eternity. In all these times that pass by in our lives, the end goal is eternity. We're going to toil. We're going to enjoy. We're going to be happy. We're going to be sad. But all these things have a purpose in God's plan. See, man cannot add or take away from what God does. God cannot change God's will. Man cannot change God's will. And that kind of seems bleak in some perspectives, but in reality, it's really a blessing. You see, in God's design, for example, a child should never have to worry about where they'll sleep or what they'll eat or if they'll even have clothes. A child does not have much responsibility as to its own care. It's the parent who has the responsibility to provide for these things. See, the child fully relies on their parents for their own substance. It doesn't take away the child's responsibility for things like chores and obedience. But you see, the parents are in control of the household just as God is in control of all things in the universe. He is the one who gives and takes away. But see, he does so through his perfect and holy eternal purpose. And we as children of God should trust God for all of our provisions, and we should be following his leading. See, a household goes awry when the roles of the parent and child are not fully realized as prescribed by God. So we should really thank God for his protection and his leading. Even those times we don't quite see where God's leading us. That as Solomon points out, God is the one in control. God directs. God leads. And let's trust him and thank him, even when we're not sure what he's doing, knowing that his perfect will is good. Well, today's trivia question: which of David's sons tried to become king before Solomon? David had many sons. Solomon is not his first nor his last. A lot of sons were mentioned to different wives, but it was, in fact, from 1 Kings chapter 5, verse 5. It was Adonijah. And it says, "Now Adonijah, whose mother was Haggith, put himself forward and said, I will be king. So he got chariots and horses ready with 50 men to run ahead of him." And if you read all the way down through 1 Kings 5, before David passes away, he makes sure that the prophets, the priests all know, that Bathsheba knows, and Solomon knows, that Solomon will in fact be the king who reigns. But there for a little bit, it was up in the air when Adonijah claimed the throne. Well, I want to thank you for joining me for what was a rather short Decision Point podcast today. And as we end, I would like to ask you one thing. If you would please keep Second Avenue Missionary Baptist Church in your prayers as we begin the process of looking at a new building project to replace and expand a dilapidating fellowship hall and adding much needed classroom space for Sunday school and Wednesday night kids activities and youth activities as well. So please be in prayer as the design team gets together and plays a major role in getting that ready for finances, for wisdom, and more importantly of all, for God's timing. And I'd also like to thank you again, as always, for listening to me today and joining me on today's Decision Point. If you'd like to know more about what's happening at Second Avenue Missionary Baptist Church, please download our app on your mobile device or visit our website at secondavenuembc.org. And thanks for spending your time with me today. And I'm looking forward to joining you again next week for another Decision Point.
Thank you for listening today, and if you enjoyed what you heard, consider leaving us a 5-star rating and review. It will help us reach more people just like you who need to hear this message. Also remember that you can stay connected with us by downloading our mobile app. Just search for Second Avenue spelled out on the App Store or Google Play Store. Thank you again for listening, and God bless.